feed. We are so excited that you are with us on another Higher Ed 120 webinar sponsored by Circle. My name is Sarah Jackson, and we are broadcasting live from Cincinnati, Ohio, from the Xavier Center for Innovation. And joining me today is our expert co-host, Robin Oliver. Robin, welcome to the show today.
Thanks for having me, Sarah. I'm joining you guys from here in beautiful Cullowhee, North Carolina, at Western Carolina University, which is the westernmost campus in the UNC system, and just a short 15-minute drive in the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. So it's a beautiful place to be on a summer day.
That's awesome. I just appreciate your time, Robin. I know that we have so much interest in this topic, and I am just grateful that we can tag team. I know you and I met in Nashville at a CASE conference, and we've sort of been chit-chatting about all this stuff, ever since. So this is going to be fun to really unearth our conversation in front of all these people today. I can't wait. It's going to be a good time. All right, so like every webinar that we start, we want to go over a few housekeeping issues just to make sure that technically, if you have any issues, we want to go over ways to solve for those, just to make sure that you have a really good experience with us today. We want this to be very interactive. So if at any time you have a question, please go ahead and enter that in the chat box. We try and get to all the questions live. We conduct our question and answer session maybe a little bit differently than on some webinars you're used to. It's sort of like when you were in the third grade and you were afraid to raise your hand and ask that question. Well, no one's going to know the question that you ask. We won't call out your name, but we will read the question live for the benefit of everyone to hear, and we'll try to answer all of those within today's webinar. So please, please, please jump in. Is this recorded? It is. I know what's going to happen. You're going to watch this and you're going to say, oh, I wish my whole team were here watching this. And that's okay. If they missed it, we are going to email you a link with resources and different things, key points from today, so that you'll have it all and you can share it with your team if you'd like. This is not your typical webinar. So I know sometimes you get on webinars and at the very end, you got to wait for the 5 stories, or it just feels like it kind of goes on and on and on and on. We're going to get right to it. Every slide is meant to be of great value to you, so that way they're full of stats, talking points in case you want to go back to your team leader or a VP. It's really meant to empower you and arm you with the best way to not only evolve for yourself, but for your team. This is also, again, going to highlight just the same principles that Robin and I share and value. So you'll kind of get a peek to how some of the fundamental things that we just believe. If you have technical difficulties at any time, if your screen is not advancing, you of course can enter that in the chat box, but if you have technical difficulties and things aren't working, sound goes out, you can call us. And of course, we'd love to keep the conversation going. Please feel free to continue that conversation on Twitter today. So a little bit about you. We want to start with our audience. We want to let you know that we have heard you. Everyone, we really appreciate you filling in that survey piece, because that really drives the content and the quality of content that we are going to deliver in our next 40 minutes together. So we asked the question, what is preventing you from really maximizing engagement with your audience and retention of that audience? And you can see that of all of our audience members today, 73% have it feels like there's a lot of one-man bands out there. And I know, Robin, you're going to talk about this a little later on, but time is an issue, money is an issue, and also people do not know their audience. So we have taken this into consideration when Robin and I were discussing, all of the key points and the best practices and all the tips that you're hungry for. The other thing that we're diving in deeper is we have heard you on what do you hope to learn. So we've taken all of the survey responses and sort of summarized them into some high-level key points. We've got a lot of people that want to know about retention. How do they want to be retained? We've got people that want to know about methods that have limited funds, but they want to stay on top of these best practices. So what are some of those? Money is an issue. So what's low cost and easily things that we can easily implement to increase that participation? How do you execute multi-channel storytelling strategies? Again, a lot of limited labor resources. How do you effectively create content for a diversity of audience? So we have heard that a lot of people have a wide range of people with different interests, different topics, different demographics. And what is a data-driven strategy? And I think this is the key point that you can begin using today. So we're going to make sure that we deliver all of this. Again, I've personally have read and reread through all the survey comments, and want to make sure that we hit as many of those as we can. We've got one more. How do we understand content that caters to all groups? And that's really why we are here today. So a little bit about me before we jump in. I have had a interesting background, have worked in PR, communication, marketing, have worked for the Cincinnati Bengals, planning game day entertainment, working with sponsors. I've worked for a sewer district, nonprofits, school districts, before coming to Circle. And so really have, and all the hats I've worn have been tasked with this, task of how do you really engage an audience, not just communicate or distribute information, but truly engage them. And it's something that I'm so passionate about and that I think about 25 hours a day. And I'm so excited to have somebody, my wonder twin, Robin Oliver. Robin, will you talk a little bit about your background? Because I think it's important for our audience to hear kind of the journeys that you've had and what led you to Western Carolina doing what you're doing for them today.
Sure, I'll be happy to do that. So unlike Sarah, my resume is not all that long. I'm one of those loyal people that kind of sticks around an organization. I feel like they're few and far um, between these days, but I've still had a fun career. I started out working for Scripps Howard newspapers as a newspaper reporter, worked in a couple of different cities, loved that adventure, and then I kind of stumbled my way into PR for a company in Alabama called Big Communications. And I worked in traditional media relations for a while. And then when social media became a thing, when Facebook landed off college campuses, we decided we ought to start up a social media arm of the company. So I was tapped to figure that out and staff that. And then we discovered that, hey, we really ought to be doing web development as well. So I started up that piece of the service line, and later on brought those two things together and started up a content marketing arm of our agency. And so I've really spent a lot of time in digital content, in the content side of marketing. I left Big as the chief content officer there and came to Western Carolina because I love the area, but also because I really saw an opportunity in higher education for taking what I had learned with content marketing and really bringing it to life in a place that has so many incredible stories to tell. And so that's how I ended up here at Western Carolina.
Well, and I cannot thank you enough for, coming on the show today, Robin, because I really love this aspect of your journey where you've got all of these really great best practices that you learned in your prior life, but are really learning how to apply them at the university level. And I think that some of the codes that you've cracked are going to be really beneficial because there's a lot of people that are sitting in your same seat. So I can't wait to jump in with you. So let's get started. Rachel, the problem that we are tackling today is this R&R problem. Let's jump in and talk about this a little bit about how and the why is it so difficult. What's going on in that higher ed landscape of why and how is it hard to reach and resonate with students and alumni?
Yeah, this is something that I hear across the board from colleagues at other university institutions and when I'm at conferences across the country, that everybody is really having the same problem, which is we have this content. We have so many stories to tell, but not everything really hits with our audience. And sometimes that's prospective students, and today we're going to really be talking about alumni. And alumni is a big target. I mean, they're the core of your development, and we really need to keep them engaged with our institution so that we can um, get the private donations that we need, first of all, but also just to keep that just great alumni support and base always engaged. And, I find time and time again having conversations about what is it that they want to hear about, because we tell them these stories that we think they're going to be all engaged in, and sometimes they fall flat. And so today we're going to be talking about some ways that we can get at what it is that they want to hear for our particular institutions, and also some best practices that I feel like I've learned since coming to higher ed about the content that really matters to them.
Well, and I also want to point out too, for the audience that this isn't just a higher ed problem, right? This is all across the nation in every genre, small corporations, big corporations, nonprofits, churches, K through 12. I mean, you name it, open rates, and this is the national average. I know this is in particular with email, and we're going to be talking about lots of communication channels today. But if we just took email and start there, the click-through rates are 2.9, your unsubscribe rates. But in higher ed, it's a little bit magnified, right? The problem is even more, and we're going to talk about the why behind that. But open rates are a little bit less, click-through rates looks like they're a little bit higher. You've got your unsubscribe rate and then your bounce rates there. So these are stats that we want to provide you. We will also be sending a link to this presentation. So if you're furiously writing notes, we've got it. We'll give you a link to the presentation so that you can use some of these and see and compare, where you land in terms of, what's going on and, in the higher ed. But I think what we really want to get into and what I want to talk about is the why. Robin, you and I have talked about this, and I know it's something, on our team that we think about all the time. And this is an amazing slide. This is a slide that talks about what happens every minute. So the fact of the matter is, and Robin, I'd love to get your thoughts on this, that, this is really your alum are drowning in content, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, and I would add, Sarah, that this is a really big problem on social media. So if you guys are working in positions where you're doing a lot of social, you probably know that Facebook algorithm and soon to come Instagram, they rank things on engagement. It's true on LinkedIn as well. So if your audience is engaging with posts, if they're liking them and responding to them and commenting on them, then your posts are going to organically move up in their feed. If they're not engaging with your posts, if they see them, but they never like them, they never, comment on them, they never share them, then those posts begin to move down in their feeds. And what happens is eventually you have work to gather all these followers, but they're not seeing your content because they've never engaged with it. And, Facebook says, hey, they don't think that's important. So even though they like your page, we're just going to move that content down. So it's a really big problem because it, really limits your ability to get that content out to your audience.
And I love that you point out the whole Facebook algorithm thing, because I think, back in the old days of Facebook, my goodness, people built their businesses on the backs of Facebook. I mean, if you won that then you earned that and they saw your content, and it's not that way anymore. So I think that's an excellent point. And I know that, we had several people fill out the pre-survey before this webinar saying, I really want to know how to execute a multi-channel storytelling strategy with limited resources. So I know we're going to jump into that, but I think this slide's important to really talk about. I mean, in fact, just, the Google CEO mentioned that we produce more content in one single day than we did from the beginning of time to the year 2003. So it's no wonder that it's so difficult to cut through the noise and reach that audience. But we've cracked some code on some things, so we're going to keep on going. Here's another stat: 75% are frustrated that the content doesn't match their interest. And again, I know we've got some people on the call and on the show today that want that best practices for communicating with those different audiences. So let's talk about this. I know, Robin, I love that you're talking about the real dangers of not being aware about how those social channels work. But when we talk about people tuning out, it could have a reverse effect where they're feeling like it's not relevant, or it's too frequent, or it's in the wrong style. Can you talk about some of these dangers about how you could be doing things, but then things could maybe backfire?
Absolutely. I think this is a huge risk today. I mean, we're in a world where, we used to depend on the media to get our story out, but now we can tell it ourselves and we can tell it in the way that we want to tell it. And there's always this tendency or this desire to, really be the brand, tell it from the brand perspective. And I am the biggest brand champion that you might meet, but at the same time, you really got to get it, got to create content and produce content that matters to your audience. And um, too often we're putting content in front of them that we think is important that they don't. And what happens over time is that they just lose interest in us altogether. I mean, they're annoyed. What happens is our alums are annoyed, and so they go away. We're not giving them what they want in the way that they want it, and we lose them. We lose that opportunity to engage with them over time.
Well, and this problem is really magnified in higher ed. And I think the next few slides that we're going to talk about are the reasons for that. And I think these are good reasons to give the audience today so that I also think today's like about self-awareness. You when you just said, hey, our alumni are annoyed. If I'm sitting in an alumni relations position listening today, I might feel like I'm going to get a couple cold glasses of water to the face, but I think it's important to share that. And I think, some of these reasons we talk about, and this was on the survey of having, such a wide range of interest for the alums. Do you find that too with your alumni, Robin?
Oh, absolutely. And I know I saw on the comments that a lot of people were asking about getting at that millennial generation, that young alum. And, that's something that we talk about here a lot as well. But I do think, this picture is telling on the slide because we talk a lot about those people who are sort of an older demographic that love to get in the alumni magazine. But then you've got the 20 something who, gets a dozen free magazines in the mail and could care less about the alumni magazine. So it's the content you choose, it's the vehicles that you choose to tell it. We just have this wide range of people that we have to get to, and that can be really challenging, especially when we have limited resources.
Well, and when we talk about that millennial generation, that now this is an issue, right? The average alum is graduating with $35,000 worth of college debt. So when they graduate, like, what do you say to them, right? I mean, it's not going to be give to the university because that will fall on deaf ears. So this is an issue where I think, we were at, I think it was the same case conference you and I met. We went to a session and it was called like the apocalypse or something, the doomsday of giving. And the speaker, it was Dr. James McDearman, and made a great point that these millennials are really viewing their college experience very transactional. It would be like, hey, I paid off my Honda, I made my last car payment, and then Honda calls me and says, hey, you want to donate to Honda? So this is another real issue that might not be in other institutions, maybe in nonprofits, but certainly in higher ed. This is something. And is this something that you guys are talking about with your alumni relations staff, the marketing communication department?
Yeah, I think, as college tuition has escalated all over the country, and, as that happens and college debt continues to go up, and, I know that my husband is 41, and he just recently finished paying off his college tuition. So, just think about that. You want to have this development relationship, this donor relationship with someone by the time they're established and in their 40s, but yet there's some of them are still paying on their college debt. And it is a big issue. And we do hear actually back from some young alums who say, please stop asking me for money. You're already getting a check from me every month.
Yeah.
What we talk about is engagement, really keeping them engaged with their institution and making them feel the value of their education and their experience. And then going back to them with that, hey, if you value this development message.
Yeah. And I love that you're with us today, Robin, because I know that it seems like through our conversations, you're looking at this problem very holistically, where how does marketing communications impact alumni relations? How does that impact development? Because if I were to ask your husband, okay, over whenever he graduated, however long ago that was, over all those years, what were all the messages that you got from your college or university? It'd be interesting to see how many, fundraising messages there were versus non-fundraising messages.
Yeah, let's face it. I mean, too many of our institutions, that's the only message we're sending our alums. The only message. In fact, my husband's institution is a great example. I won't name them since I'm gonna talk bad. But, I mean, we get three three or four pieces of mail a year asking us for money. But, rarely do they engage with us in other ways. Even on social media, they're not doing this particular institution's not doing terrible, great job. And we're all guilty of that sometimes because we're in the mode of, we got to crank out that next annual giving mailer. And we forget that, there really needs to be something in front of that, some dialogue, some engagement, some storytelling that's going to make this alumni feel like they have something to be giving to.
Well, and the other reason is this, and I want to talk about this because again, a lot of our audience members today, I mean, we had over half say, I, don't have staff, I don't have resources, I want strategies for this. Can you talk about what your staffing is like in your alumni relations department and how you guys are staffed?
Yeah, and I think our institution is a great example. We're probably very similar to many of you guys who are one-man band type shops. We have a small alumni relations group that has 3 employees, and one of those employees, his job includes social media, it includes email marketing, it includes web updates, it also includes travel to events all over the state and around the region. So as you can imagine, that dude is pretty busy, right? I mean, he's got a lot going on. And when you're on the road, going to an event, keeping up with the website updates and posting good things on social media and developing content strategy, I mean, it's a lot of work on one person. And what we have found at Western is that collaboration really helps. So the more collaborating that we can have between alumni and admissions and university marketing and our PR office to really kind of leverage, our chief comm officer always says, write once, use often, right? So how do we leverage the work that each other is doing and get on the same page so that we can do more with less?
Well, and before we jump into all of your secrets that you've done, again, I think this is really a webinar about self-awareness and how do I know, if I'm sitting in a development or alumni relations or marketing position, on my campus, what are the red flags if we know that we might be going down a bad road? Because if you're so far in the weeds, you might not know, hey, we're annoying our alumni. So you and I talked about, unfortunately, when you are underwater with work, this is perpetuating 3 really bad practices, and these could sort of serve as red flags to you and your team. Robin, would you mind sort of going over these 3? Let's start with the first one.
Yeah, sure. So the first thing is, Sarah and I talked about this. What do we do when we don't really know what our alumni want to read, what they want to hear about? We just guess, right? We think, what would I want to read? What would I want to hear about? And I have to remind myself daily that I am not the typical prospective student. I am not our typical alum. And every time we do research and surveys, I just that becomes ever more clear. And guessing is just dangerous. I mean, if we are always just, a team of 2 people sit down and come up with a content strategy without any sort of outward look as to what people want, we often miss the target because we don't know what it is.
All right, let's jump to the second one. Not taking the
So kind of,
time to know your audience.
yeah, and all of these obviously relate to one another, but related to that, taking the time to know your audience. So I tell this story that I when I started working at Western, I started going around to department meetings to talk a little bit about what their marketing strategy had been and what they wanted it to be and what they wanted to accomplish. And every time I walked into one of these meetings, and this is not just development and alumni affairs, this was also, academic units and other units on campus. And I would say, okay, so tell me a little bit about your marketing. And they would start into what it was that they thought they wanted to do. So it was always a tactic first approach. Like, we need a brochure. We need to start a social media channel. We need to improve our website. And, after about 5 of these conversations, I was like, wait a minute, no one is talking about goals and no one is talking about audience. And so I started coming into these meetings and saying, okay, forget about the things that you want to do because you really don't know what those are until you know what you want to accomplish and you know who your audience is. What does that audience look like? What is their makeup? You cannot do good content strategy, you cannot do good digital marketing without really understanding who it is that you're trying to reach. So if you don't have a good sense for your audiences, I think that's really important.
All right, and I know that you're gonna give tips on how to figure this out here in a couple slides, but really when you take the first one we talked about and now the second one, it really then, and I love when we talked offline about this, it really perpetuates this university then starts to face inward, almost becoming self-absorbed. And I think Robin, you said something like um, they're focusing on what matters to the university and it might not be what matters to the alumni. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
And I'm sure everyone on this call knows exactly what we're talking about here, right? Because you have those academia is the worst about this. I mean, I saw this definitely in the corporate sector when I was working in the agency world, but academics, they just really take the cake on this one, where they kind of decide what they feel is important, the story that they want to tell about themselves, and they go about doing that and feeling well accomplished for it. And sometimes when they're not doing good measurement, they don't even know that it's not working. They don't know that their alumni don't care about the things that they care about. And this is a real big risk in higher education, and I see it a lot. I see a lot of strategy failing because folks are too inwardly focused. I know at my institution we're in a fairly rural area, and so it's really easy to just see what we see here and not ever really look outside of ourselves.
I love that. And I love how, I love how we structured this webinar because again, if I'm the one sitting, I'm the one man band sitting in the audience thinking, that is me and that's my leadership. I like how we've given you a lot of stats to sort of beef up your case for starting to look outward and to really give the answer, which Robin, you say is data. So I want to jump into this data piece because I think it scares a lot of people. It feels heavy, it feels overwhelming, and we really want to minimize that for everybody today. Again, I know I keep saying this, I feel like I'm having a love fest with Robin here, but you're somebody that I feel like is like one of us, and that you have yet had this amazing experience in your background, but yet now you're in the trenches, sort of, and can really give some practical advice on that. So when we talk about data, where do you find this? And so I'm just going to sort of pull some of these things up as you start talking about them, and so people can start to crack this code of where do I find the data and what do I do with it?
Yeah, and I know that this is a big overwhelming word, right? I think that there's this trend right now, big data, right? And I put it in air quotes, so I couldn't see that. But this idea of big data, everybody's like scared of it. What the hell does that mean? Excuse my language, but we're not sure, what big data means. But so I would say just forget big data and let's just think about small data that we know that we can get our hands on and that we're probably not doing very well today. So one of those is social analytics. If you have a Facebook account, and I'm sure you all do, your Facebook account will tell you all sorts of things about how your audience is engaging with your posts. Your LinkedIn account will tell you all sorts of things about the people who are following you and what sort of industries they work in. Your Twitter account can give you all kinds of insights about who your followers are also following. So there's great resources there that are free and available to you. Another thing is newsroom stats. So some of you guys are in communications. I saw a fair number of you are in marketing as well. So this might be something you'd have to team up with your PR or communications office on. But one of the things that we do here at Western is that our newsroom, we actually have a most popular feature on our newsroom that's built in. So our newsroom's constantly telling us what the most popular stories are. You go and click on that button, and it'll say, okay, here are the most read stories of the last couple of weeks. But that gives good insight as to what people are reading and what they're clicking through to from your email marketing or from your social. and that they're more interested in. Sarah talked a little bit about email open rates and responses. Um, that's huge, huge. Can't emphasize enough how huge that is. It's something that I've often walked in organizations where they actually have these analytics available to them from their emails, but they're not really looking at them strategically. So when I say that, they might be saying, okay, well, 57% of our people open our emails, so we're rocking it, because that's way above average. But they're not looking at who's clicking through from our emails and to what stories are they clicking through to. And hey, I have these 7 different emails I send out to 7 different segments, and I can tell by looking at all of those that, we get high click-through rates on this story from this group and on this story over here from this group. So those are all like really great insights that you can analyze as well. Surveys is another thing that many of you guys probably use if you run an alumni magazine and you haven't done an alumni magazine survey, then hey, it's time to dust that off and get that out and do one. But there are also lots of other ways that we can survey our alums. We can survey them through our social media platforms. You can survey them via email. Don't be afraid to ask. And actually my, kind of last tip on where do you find data is, always have the door open for feedback. It's kind of like, when you're driving along the highway and you see those trucks that say, you should always be asking, how's my driving? How am I doing on my content? Every opportunity you can give your alums to give you feedback on what you're offering them. If that means, it's the footer at the bottom of every single email that you send out, like, tell it, not interested in these stories, tell us what you want to hear. Always have that door open for feedback, because you'd be surprised what people will serve up if you just ask.
Well, and I know that a lot of our again, guests, our attendees today on the webinar, they really wanted that broad view of a content strategy and tactics that we can use. I got to be honest, Robin. Okay, again, I'm going to just pretend I'm the one-man band sitting here. This feels like it takes a lot of time. We had this conversation, I know yesterday about it feeling that way and appearing that way. Can you talk about the commitment and the planning on this?
Yeah, y'all don't know Sarah, but you know that she's half joking right now because I'm the skeptic in the room. And when we met each other, she's giggling because when we met each other, I said, you guys have this platform and you say there's this thing, I don't believe it, right? So we're kind of having that same exchange backwards right now. She's like, you say you can do all these things. Sure, Robin, that's going to work. And what do they do? 10 people to do this? So here's what I would say. You can have 10 people doing just this. You could, just hire out the wazoo, put them all on social analytics and, open rates and cross-reference and double check and, put together reports. Hate to say this, it's kind of like the IT division. Do you guys have an IT division like our division? It just takes forever to do everything because they analyze everything down the back. You can totally do that, but you can also do that with just you. And if you're not doing it and you're thinking, I just don't have time for that, like I just don't have time. Here's the thing, you are wasting your time making content that may or may not work. You're just wasting your time. This is not something that you can sort of do if you can figure out how to make space for it. This is stuff that is going to make you better at your job. It's going to make you more efficient. It's going to help you in your conversations with your leadership team when you can say, we did this analysis. We determined that these are the things that people wanted to see. We put together a content plan based on that, and now we've improved our engagement rate. I mean, how many people want to have that conversation with their boss? I mean, I know I do. So I would say that this is something that you genuinely, if all you can make is 30 minutes a week, then make 30 minutes a week to at least look at your analytics on social, to at least, think about your email open rates and your email click-through rates and what does that mean in terms of your content strategy. Go ahead and put in a plan for a survey if you're not doing one already, and get that done, get it on the books, plan it for fall. So this is something that you can make time to do. You don't have to spend an enormous amount of time doing it, but if you're not doing it, then you're just wasting your time on something else.
I love that you said that. I love that you said you can make time because, again, I almost feel like we could be on a infomercial, talking about like, let's work out, right? Because what happens if you don't, right? That 30 minutes a day, is going to give you a healthier strategy. And I think today we're going to give you a mix. It's kind of like having this fundamental belief. And I know this is why I love talking to you, Robin, because we share the same beliefs that do you want fast food or you want to organically grow and be healthy? And so we're going to give some of that fast food today that tide you over so you can develop that organic, really healthy strategy. But this is and I know we're spending a lot of time on this slide, but it really is making that fundamental shift of, what is the best, healthiest strategy here, to truly engage our alums. And so I want to jump into some best practices that you've used with the type of staffing that you have, Robin, to get this done and to at least let's start in the right direction. Like, let's get off that couch and stop eating potato chips, right? Let's just stop that and then let's just go for a 30-minute walk, right? So these are some beginning easy things that that you shared that I want to share, with our attendees today. Let's start with the first one.
Yeah, so Sarah has now made me feel enormously guilty for not working out. How about y'all? Okay, just want to make sure we're on the same place.
Because you're too busy coming up with awesome strategies, in the great mountains.
Right. So here's what I would say. If you want to feel better about not eating healthy this week and not exercising, then hey, do some data analysis. Yeah, this slide is just to say that if you want to do all of that, but you really don't have time, it goes back to planning. And I kind of make fun of higher ed, even though I work in it now, to say that, higher ed loves to plan, right? You have a committee that develops the plan for the group that's going to develop the plan for implementation. And then you have implementation team that's going to develop a plan for staffing. There's always planning going on. But this is where planning really comes into play and really can help make us successful, because when you're really good at your content, what you're doing is you're creating a content plan that carries across multiple channels. And it may be the same story, but you're telling it in a different way on Facebook, and a different way on Twitter, and a different way in your alumni magazine, and a different way on your newsroom site. But all of those things, maybe it's a print ad that comes into play too, but all of those things are timed out in a way that you can see how well you did with each one of those. So how did that piece of content, was it successful across those different channels? And one of the other things, like just a bonus of this that you'll find is that when you do that planning, a lot of times just by putting it on all your different channels, makes that story take off. So it performs better on Facebook because you're also doing it well online. So that planning just is huge, and also the one other piece here is commitment. So I would say it takes planning and it takes commitment. So you really have to, the data analysis is something you have to be committed to. Put it on your calendar every Friday at 4. Before I leave, I'm going to look at my analytics. What you're going to find is you're staying Friday until 5:15 because you're so fascinated by what you're seeing. And then you're going to want to put it on your calendar on Monday too. I mean, this stuff is, I'm sort of a data wonk, but you're going to love what you learn from this and how much it can help your job.
And what if you do all that work and a story, just like we talked about, stories falling flat? What then?
So I went to this conference one time and listened to this guy who's a big head over PR for a big major Fortune 500 company, and he was talking about social strategy, and he said, we cannot be afraid to fail, because failure is the mother of all invention, right? That is a famous phrase. It takes failure to innovate. And so we cannot be afraid to develop a great plan for a piece of content, push that plan out, and then look at the analytics and go, wow, that totally did not work. Because when it doesn't work, you learn more, as much, if not more, than you learn when it does work. And so don't stress out over, hey, I did all this work and it didn't work. At least you're tracking it. At least you're not going to waste your time next time. Try something else. Try something new again. Just keep trying something new until you find something that really flies.
Well, and on that content note, we are now to the meat of the webinar, why everyone has signed up. Let's get to it, Robin, on what is the content that you've done all this work, done your workouts, you've done your data analytic workouts, and now what are the results that you're seeing with your alumni?
Yeah, so here we go. Content that works with every alumni audience every time. Um, yeah. Thank you, Sarah. You're supposed to laugh, right? You all should be laughing about that because it's very hard to hit on a story that's going to work for every single alum, for every college, every time. Our audience is just too diverse for that. But I can tell you that we spent a lot of time over the last year or so looking at the content that we've been putting out and seeing how our alumni responded to that content, and then kind of cross-referencing and going, okay, what is really moving the numbers? And then my social media manager and I have also looked at some other institutions and what they're doing and what we see success from them. And what we're finding is that a lot of the things that are succeeding for us are also succeeding for other institutions. So that tells us that there's some trend development here, right? So I'm going to give you my top 5 things that I think will work even with your alumni audience, no matter where you are and what your alum looks like.
All right, here we go. And before we get into this, I think I love this tongue-in-cheek sort of slide. But this is really the results and the harvest of your labor. And you have figured this out for your audience. So I think it's valuable in that, all right, if you're just getting started and you need some ideas to get started while you're developing your data strategy, these are things that Robin, you're saying they can do now that will probably work so that they continue to look like a rock star now, but yet buy them some time, while they're learning their audience and while they're looking at that data. Yeah?
Absolutely.
All right, so let's jump in. Here we go on the first one.
All right. So if you all of you guys,
Okay, Robin, I think we lost you. I know, I think we've got some sound issues here. Okay, we've lost our sound with Robin, but she is trying to come back. She's lost her connections. She's telling us to keep going. But her first one is anything that has beautiful photography. So this is one from Harvard. Anything that shows the beauty of your campus. So campus photography has really worked not only with Robin. So it really evokes this, I think, this connecting the head and heart kind of piece. A picture is worth 1,000 words. So photography is really, really key, good photography. And you can do this by even soliciting pictures, from your alumni, of beautiful pictures that they have taken. But this is something that, again, you don't have to write a lot of content for. The pictures are beautiful, and you can use that, across all channels. Again, we're still trying to get Robin back, but we're gonna keep going. Robin, you with us now? And Robin, I think if you're back with us, just turn your audio sound on, and I think we'll be able to hear you again.
ooh, I got it. Sorry about that, y'all.
You were just
Oh,
like, you're a tease. You are such, it's like, all right, we got all this foreplay, here we go. And you're like, we're done. What the heck's going on, dude?
oh, technology is a beautiful thing, and sometimes not. Sorry, I think I just lost my signal there for a second, but I'm back. No worries. It won't happen
All right,
again.
well, I talked about all of your awesome photography, so I didn't deliver it as well as you did, but I carried you till you came back.
Okay, so if she didn't say this, the important thing about this slide is that, first of all, the picture is gorgeous, obviously, but this has 1,034 shares. So if you're a social media person like me, you know that shares are awesome because they get you in front of so many more people. And we've seen this at Western too. Just anytime we show a beautiful picture of our campus, really well shot, even if you're resharing it from Instagram, as this one is, just it takes off. People love it. And you can bake this stuff into your email content and your magazine content and your newsroom content. It's been huge.
All right. Next one is
So the next one, um, the next one is about love. This is one that's really surprised me over the course of the last year, and I've seen other institutions really start doing this. But last year, we decided that we were going to do something uh, around this couple that we had heard about were getting engaged. They were seniors, and it was just kind of a offhand. Our social media intern knew a guy who's getting engaged. They were seniors. So we had him text us a photo of their engagement, and we posted this engagement photo of this young couple, and we said, "Hey, if you got engaged to your sweetheart here at Western Carolina, share your story." And we got enormous response from that. I mean, over 150 people sent us not only messages, but photos of their engagement, their wedding, their last anniversary, a picture of them with their kids, all these alums just telling us their stories about how they met at Western Carolina. And what I love about that is that there are a few things, a handful of things that are sort of common nostalgia. Did you meet your spouse here? You know, do you want to tell us a story about this awesome residence hall that's always had this great story rooted with it? So what are those kind of common things that are going to really surface up some memories for folks that you can ask for your alumni to engage around? Engagements are always a beautiful one, so
I
feel free to
love
use
that
that.
one. All right,
So
well,
the
give us
next,
the next one.
yes, sports. I don't think anybody on this call today actually works specifically for athletics, and you're probably thinking, yeah, we have somebody who covers the games. Sure, you do. But here's what I would say. I spent a lot of time in Alabama, and I learned that football is a religion. And I didn't know that that would really carry everywhere, but here I am working for a school that is, not in the SEC. And even here at Western Carolina, where the football program has only recently begun winning games, it is huge when we have big sports accomplishments. And so, what I started doing is myself or one of our social media interns will go to some of the big games, and that could be football, it could be baseball, it could be soccer. And when there's a winning moment, when we score a touchdown or we kick that big goal or the game winning moment, we try to post a photo in the moment. So, within the next minute of that happening, we get down in the nitty gritty. We take a really grainy, horrible photo with our smartphone, and we post that up on our social media channels, on our university social media channels. And often our alum groups will share that with their folks. And what we have seen is just huge response, not from current students, which was who we were originally targeting, but from our alums. They really love to see their university winning, and they really love to see it in the moment. Back last fall, we played the University of Alabama, top school in the nation, top football program in the nation, and it was a pay game, and we really were, of course, expected to lose. But in the opening drive, we had the ball and we scored a touchdown, so we were up 7-0 to Alabama. And I posted a picture of that touchdown, and the number of likes that that got almost doubled the number of following on our Facebook. So it was just huge. Those moments are, seem to be play well with really with the alumni audience. So I'd encourage you to use that.
Well, and it's like fate happened because we just got a question coming in which really talks about this next one about, okay, we get it on the athletics, check, check, but how does this translate? We just got a question coming in like from a professional school, such as a medical school.
Oh, perfect. Great question. So this one is from MIT. This is a post from the School of Engineering. And so I call this the "We Just Cured Cancer" content strategy. And every time, when there's an email going out, I say, well, man, I wish we could say we just cured cancer because everybody seems to open those. But it's not just that. It's just big, amazing accomplishments from an academic perspective that your university did. And I put this one up on MIT. I don't know if you guys have ever been to MIT's Facebook page, but if you scroll through it, it's just full of these. I mean, MIT does something amazing like this every single day. And what I love about this post is this post got a ton more engagement than their typical post about, an amazing accomplishment. And it's because of the writing. It's because of the way that they framed it up. Imagine writing the code that made history. MIT programmers did just that. So it's not, down in the nitty gritty of we just did such and such and such and such academic, but it's really kind of telling the story in a way that makes it sound big and important and memorable and, life changing. And when you do those things, when you have those accomplishments, you should be telling that story very proudly and in that kind of "we are awesome" voice, because your alumni they love to be proud of their school. They love to hear those stories. And so anytime you have a story like that, you should be definitely pushing that out.
All right, and I think we've got one more. Let's talk about this one.
Yeah, so I said the fifth thing is big campus change. Now, I am not talking about that boring article that your, business officer wrote about the master plan that tells about the 17 different things that are coming. I'm really talking about real, tangible, photographable change that is happening on your campus. And I use this example from Western Carolina. The Chili's restaurant is coming to WCU this fall, and all of you are like, "Wow, that could not be more boring." But if you knew Cullowhee, you would know that, this is a really huge deal because forever we don't have any chain restaurants here in town. And back when many of our alums, as you can see by the post on the bottom, all they had was a Hardee's and Speedy's Pizza, which is still around. And so it's a really big deal that a sit-down chain restaurant is coming to Cullowhee is huge, and that it's coming to campus is even huger. So when there's that big campus change and it's going to be different for every single campus, if you can really kind of harness that for your alumni audience, they really love to know about those changes happening on their campus, even though they're not there. You see, this was posted on the Alumni Association Facebook page. It has 220 likes, which doesn't seem like a ton from a university. Alumni Association Facebook page just building, don't really have a huge following, and typical for them is anywhere between 10 and 75 likes. So this is more than double the engagement that it would typically get.
Well, and I think it drives back the point that it's what's personal to your campus. Some are curing cancers, other open, Chili's. Now you can go get engaged at Chili's, right?
Oh,
I love
romance is
this.
in the air.
I love it. I like Chili's. Do you like Chili's? They should have been a sponsor of this. And we could have
They
like
should have.
totally said, all right, Chili's, go. We could have said it like 5,000 times. And then
Why didn't we do that earlier?
why didn't we do that? I don't know. We were too busy looking at data, I guess. All
Okay,
right.
so I
Well,
really hope that yeah, I was going to say, I hope you guys have taken something away from all of that. I know some of these things are pretty obvious, like sort of yeah, of course we're doing these things, but I would remember that these things should be part of your planning. So when these things are coming up, you don't want to wait until the moment happens. You don't want to wait until that big gain. You want to get ahead of it and really plan the resources around it, plan the data mining around it, and do the best you can in the way you frame up your content to really engage with your audience.
all right. Well, and again, I know we talked about personalization, but it really is. I mean, do you see this trend, Robin, with your experience and in higher ed, this personalization?
Yeah, so now that we've talked about all these very general things, right, that are going to work for every alum, or certainly have here at Western Carolina, um, wanted to just throw a bone out there about personalization, because this is how Sarah and I met each other and we started getting to know each other. Is that her company, the company she works with, has a platform that helps groups like ours personalize content for their audience. Why do I think that's important? Because, those 5 things that I just threw out there, you're not going to have that story every day. And you've got a lot of stories that you really want to tell that may be compelling and interesting, but only work for a certain segment of your audience. You cannot, I know we certainly don't have the resources to make 400 different email lists based on topics. I mean, we barely can get out, an email for every one of our colleges. And so, this idea of being able to personalize content, like Netflix does, so Sarah's going to tell you about it, it's just really interesting to me. So now we're starting a conversation with Circle about, how can we really start personalizing our content? Is there a way that we can start to do that? Because that is going to be the future.
Well, and before we show, again, this isn't the part of the webinar. I hate when people mask, webinar content. It's like, okay, now here's the sales pitch. And that's not who we are as a company. So we're just going to spend a teeny tiny bit of this because I do want to get to the live question and answer section portion of the webinar, where we just want to show and highlight the principles that we use in our tool to really drive home Robin's points. And I know that's where kind of where our marriage happened, Robin, where we just saw things eye to eye, and the principles and the fundamental beliefs that you believe, that's what our platform is built upon. And just a few more quick tips and really, again, self-awareness of why things are so hard. So the problem is that you have platforms, and your millennials are really used to this. You go to Netflix, and you've never told Netflix that you like horror movies, but just by you watching them and by your behavior, you're telling Netflix what you want to see. Same thing with Amazon and Spotify. But the problem lies in 99% of organizations, they don't have the resources or the skills to implement effective personalization to fuel that engagement and to fuel retention. So there's a problem there, and we've heard everybody's lacking that time and staff and money. So our team at Circle thought, how is it that we, knowing this is what's happening, can provide that team of data scientists for you and provide those resources so that you can be like the Amazon and Netflix, and we can sort of level that playing field. If you're a smaller college and you are a one-man band, for you, how does that work? So if you want to know more about what we do, feel free to email me offline and we can give you a full demo. But we use behavior analytics to power personalization for any size organization. And I know a lot of people, again, they are concerned about how do we get all this done very, very easily. And our tool is designed for people that are struggling with this and struggling to go through the data of how it works. So we take all of the amazing content that you're producing. Just like Robin said, the issue is, I almost feel like it's a breakup where you say, it's not you, it's them. It's not you, it's me. It's not that you're not producing amazing stuff. That's not the problem. And even when you start to use some of Robin's best practices, it's going to get more amazing, but it's still going to be hard to reach those people. So we take all that content and we have a system that fuels the personalization of it so that every subject line is going to be personalized. There's no more A/B testing of what's the better subject line that works, right? And now when I get my news, right, this is an example from the University of Dayton, the first story that I see is going to be what's most engaging to me personally. So we're going to deliver the right content to the right alumni or student at the right time. And we're going to order their newsletter. I know a lot of people wanted to know, how do I produce a better newsletter? My answer to that is don't. With our platform, you never have to design another newsletter again. We're going to deliver that news in a way that's, we're going to show the most engaging story. And then as it gets less engaging to that person, it has less visual appeal to them. So real quickly, we're going to show you those insights, that data that Robin's talking about. What content does your audience want? Who's the most engaged? Who's the least engaged? You can search the interest of your audience. And this is where Circle really starts to close that loop between what marketing is doing. We're going to show you, these are all the top topics trending in your audience. And on the right-hand side, these are the top topics that everybody loved, but you haven't talked about in 30 days, right? And then we are able now to make some bridges between your alumni relations department. What kinds of events should we be doing? And then from a development standpoint, you might have name, address, or maybe their major, they graduated 20 years ago. We're going to tell you what your alums are interested in now. And so that way you can scale that almost major gift officer type appeal. But again, our platform is, again, based on that same fundamental belief that one size fits all messaging, it does not work. And while we did give you some of that fast food, hey, here's 5 stories that are generally working, that will only last so long, and that really you'll have to figure out what is that strategy for personalization. And we're just one of many tools that can help you with that. But I really want to keep this to make sure that we've answered all the questions that people have had. I know we've got some coming in, from different people. Let's see. So Robin, one of the questions we're getting is, all these content strategies work for universities with 30,000 undergrads, with a wide range of interest, even from music to chemical engineering. Do you find that these 5 are pretty good, solid topics?
So yeah, so here's what I would say about that. First of all, Western, we have about 60,000 alums. They're of all different ages. We've been around since the 1800s, so we've got alums of all ages. Um, we find that those five things that I gave you guys tips on, we find that they work for all types of alums, all at least all ages of alums. Now, you know, obviously not everybody got engaged at Western or responded to that post, but we did get hear from people who got engaged, you know, 3 years ago their senior year, and people who got engaged 40 years ago their senior year. So, I think all of those topics are going to span the test of time with your alumni. Also, I would just, some of this stuff is stuff that we have seen from other universities being successful as well. So that's why I wanted to highlight some of those examples from other universities. And when we look at our competitive set, we're looking at it from the outside looking in. So we don't know what their true analytics are. We're just seeing what is the engagement level of a particular type of post. So we're seeing the biggest engagement on these types of stories.
Okay. And we're getting another question here. What if we just can't produce enough content to fill all the multiple channels? Robin, you want to have any ideas of, I know our platform can pull in, external content. We've got a couple schools that are doing that to sort of beef up their content, industry, articles related to, careers and majors. So from our platform, we handle that. But any ideas of how to, if you are a one-man band, beef up that content?
Yeah, so my advice to you is quality and not quantity. So don't worry about, hey, if I posted to Facebook twice today, don't worry about it. Don't worry about how many times you've tweeted in the last week. Worry really about what are your big stories that you think are going to connect with your alums, and how am I going to message those across all of my channels. So even if they're not seeing a lot from you, they're seeing good content. That's really ultimately more important than volume. Because again, it's going to improve your ranking, it's going to help your performance if you are giving them stuff that is relevant to them. If you can't pull together a monthly newsletter, send one out twice a year. If you can't pull together a biannual magazine, make it an annual magazine. So, I would say don't worry so much about trying to get everything done, and really think about quality content and really posting that across all channels.
Well, I love that, and I think it's a good note to end on. And we'll give it about 30 seconds here if we have any more questions coming in, because I do think people feel this pressure. There is this like social media fatigue, I think, that everybody's feeling, and I know that's why we, are doing what we're doing in our world. And I love that you say that, like, don't stress out about that. I love that quality over quantity piece. So thank you for that, Robin. If there is any other questions that you have for Robin or for me, if you want to connect with us, again, we're just aligned in our thinking. We love to attract other people that feel the way that we do. I know Robin, we should put on a whole other webinar about this, but one thing that we hear a lot from people is, how do I convince my leadership to do this if I'm, sort of at the low end of the totem pole and I got to work my way up. So, I'm sure you'd be willing to talk about strategies like that offline, and to really continue the conversation. If you want to reach out to Robin, her email is there. We will also send it in the follow-up email. And we're just grateful for everyone's time. Robin, any last words for our guests today?
I guess the final thing I would say is, be proud of being involved in content, because content is the future. Being great content creators and content curators is going to be what helps our organization succeed down the road. If you're not already hearing about that at your university, you're going to be hearing more and more about it. Your management's going to be asking you, what are we doing to get engaging content out there to our alums? So it's good that you're on top of that, and wish you the best of luck. Holler at me if you need anything.
All right. Thanks so much, Robin. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to us. Look for the follow-up email, and we'll see you at our next Higher Ed 120 webinar. Thanks so much.